I think it's fair to say that LAN was a success all the way around for Call of Duty, but was it a success for all the players? Well, in this video, I'm going to give you 5 players that I think really improved their stock off the back of our first LAN, and 5 players that I think really didn't. This is Reverse Sweep Round 11 presented by USAA Insurance. The first player that I'm going to give a lot of credit to is going to be Octane. We've talked a lot over this past year and a half. Has he been stat padding? Has he just been trying to make himself look good? Does he still have it, have that motivation? Well, he came out here and showed that indeed he does. He dropped a 1.7 against London, goes absolutely huge against Paris as well, and to be honest, looked really, really good against OpTic Chicago, and was part of the reason why that went to that game 5. One player who, for me, definitely still has it and just needs a good team around him to become a force again. The second player is going to be Vivid, and this is a man who I feel I owe a little bit of an apology to. A couple months ago, I came out and said that I didn't understand Dallas picking him up. He hadn't shown anything to justify being put into the defending champions team. I still stand by a lot of what I said. He does have that low floor, as we saw in some of the series. He dropped 0.8s overall, but when he is performing really well and goes on to be a part of the wins, he's a very, very good player, and showing that if he isn't going to be getting all the kills, he's going to be a good teammate and fit into this squad really, really well. Huge potential for the future. If he can sort out his consistency, Dallas could be a very dangerous side. The third is going to be Decimate. Decimate had a lot to answer for, walked out of Seattle Surge. Everyone's questioning his ego, his decision making. He needed to come out and put on a little bit of a show. And yes, New York do finish top 6, definitely not the result they would have wanted, but I thought he played quite well. Statistically, it doesn't look great, but if you actually watch the games, he had quite a few solid moments, a couple of big clutches in the S&D, for example. And overall, I think that you've got to remember that New York are built as a team. They have a system. Asim's role is very different to the way Decimate plays. It's very difficult for him to just come and slot into this squad. Yet, I do feel he's done enough to get himself that chance at a spot next year. I do think a team should be looking at him perhaps around that mid-tier level and trying to improve. Maybe someone like a Florida who need another SMG to really show up in their squad. The fourth, we're going to go with King Cami at Toronto Ultra. This man has been fantastic all year, but let's face it, a lot of the conversation around Toronto Ultra are the onliners. Is that Bell Fiber package part of their success? They had a lot to prove here, and they nearly make it into another grand final. Probably should have, and part of that is Cami. He's been fantastic all year. He's been absolutely brilliant at this major, and in my opinion, has put himself into that top 5 conversation throughout the entire game. I think you slot him into any team that isn't Atlanta FaZe, and he immediately improves them. A phenomenal player, and quite frankly, showed here that he has so much of a skill ceiling. It's actually kind of scary and just great for us Europeans. And the final player who I think really proved themselves and made their point on their LAN debut, along with many others, is going to be Neptune of the Florida Mutineers. He dropped a 1.6 against the LAG, 1.26 against the New York Subliners, had ridiculous clutch moment after ridiculous clutch moment, and honestly, Florida continue to be that dark horse team that just aren't delivering. I think that if you have someone alongside Neptune, a really good SMG alongside Neptune who's going to play the game with him really well, I do feel Florida almost instantly become a battler for top 3. They're such a solid side all the way around, but just lack it in crucial moments. The amount of game 5s that they've gone to and lost is actually ridiculous. The games are always quite close, and Neptune is becoming a key part of their challenge. This kid's got a huge future. I just want to see him continue now to hit that level as we finish this season. Heading into the 5 players that I think have had their stock fall after this LAN period, and we're going to start off, I'm sorry to say it, with OpTic Chicago as a whole. If I did want to pick one, it would probably be Formal, but I'm going to go with OpTic Chicago as a group here. This is probably a little bit harsh on Scump, who had a pretty good event, and 1 or 2 times every player kind of had a moment, but generally speaking, they've spent the last year and a half telling us that this is going to be LAN, right? LAN's where they make it happen, LAN's where they do things. A lot of us were saying it wouldn't change anything, and surprise, surprise, wise, changed absolutely nothing. They got beat by Dallas twice. That's a storyline that is actually probably worse than they've had it throughout the year. They scraped past Seattle Surge. Yes, Seattle looked improved, but still OpTic are supposed to be a top-end team. And then they beat the Minnesota Rocker. So they did nothing different, basically. And overall, I just think it's really poor from them. Greenwall deserve better. And I do really hope to see them be better when it comes to Major 5 and then Champs. But this is a point now where we've been talking all year. OpTic need to step it up a gear. They still haven't. LAN's come and gone. I don't know what's left in the pool for these guys to kind of cling to and make an excuse around and make happen. Second player who I think really shot themselves in the foot this weekend is going to be TJ Haley. This man has done very, very little over the CDL era. The last year and a half, he's probably benefited from his past successes as part of being on OGLA and LA Thieves, and has done very little apart from maybe one or two tiny windows to justify being there. This weekend, obviously, they had a really tough situation with the whole Hugh and misspelling your damn COVID test scenario, whatever that was. But all the same, the rest of the team stepped up. TJ certainly didn't. He was the massive underwhelming performer and a big part of their round 1 exit, and I'd be very, very surprised to see him get another chance this year with how good Draza is and on the LA Thieves next year. I'd be absolutely amazed. Third, we're going to go with two players. We're going to go with Shawnee and Alex of the London Royal Ravens. The reason I've not said London overall is because I do think Paul X has been really good for London, and he was fine during this series. And then Afro deserves time. He showed that he's got plenty in the tank. He's got really good raw gun skill and energy. Shawnee and Alex were absolutely awful. Alex started the first map incredibly slow. You can't come out like that when you've got everything to prove. London are trying to show that they're at least the best of the worst teams, and then go and get completely smoked, and it's just not good enough. London should be competing far higher up the table, in my opinion, and quite frankly, this is not the time now where they can be afforded to be going out round 1, and for me, Shawnee and Alex, this is maybe a chance too far now. Our penultimate player is going to be Classic. He's just not making it happen, is he? Like, he was on Paris, who aren't a good side, and he wasn't a good player for them, and then he somehow gets picked up by Seattle, which I have 1,000 questions around, Joey Nubsy, and he's really poor for them as well. I do think a lot of his other players were putting the work in. Pristini, Gunless, Octane. I genuinely don't think that they're that bad, which is such a weird thing to say about a side that continues to be the whipping boys of the league. However, Classic was very underwhelming, didn't really do anything, and he needs to, in my opinion, prove himself in challenges again. And finally is going to be Silly. It might be a little bit harsh considering he's moved from that AR role to SMG role to try and benefit the team overall, but that was a while ago, and you can't keep sitting there and saying, oh, well, I'm trying to move on to this role and blah, blah, blah. He just wasn't very good. Sure, LA Gorillas get past Thieves, but let's face it, Thieves weren't exactly in the best spot, and he wasn't really a contributing factor in that win. The rest of the team, especially Chino and Apathy, really picked up the slack, and then when they do get smoked next, he was a big part of that again. So yeah, for me, he just really hasn't proven anything. He's definitely clinging on to that league spot via past successes, and whilst his past successes have been pretty good, he does have that World Championship ring from World War II. We are coming to the end of Cold War. It's been a long time. You know, this whole 4v4 previous defending champion thing is about to go out the window. I don't know what is left in Silly's locker to claim a league spot next year. He's got 2 more events. I could be wrong. He could come out and smoke it. But for me, I think he's on a big list of people that are probably looking at challenges next year or worse.